know exactly where we stand. Basically, the markets peaked out in 2000, had a huge bear market until October 2002 and March 2003, and then a recovery move, and the new high in 2007 in October, S&P 1,576. Then we dropped into March 6, 2009 to 666, in other words, down 50%. And then we recovered to just the other day, 1422. So basically, from the lows in March 2009, 666 to 1422, we had a huge move in markets, not just in the US, but globally. But starting last year, markets behaved less favorably. Most emerging economies' stock markets haven't made a new high, unlike the S&P. And the S&P was on May 2nd, 2011, at 1,370. We are now 1,395 or so. So we haven't really made much progress. We dropped in between to a low on October 4th, 2011 at 1,074. So from 1,074 to over 1,400 was again a very significant move. I happen to think that the technical position of the market is very bad, and despite all the optimistic talk by economists and strategists about the great recovery in the economy, if I look at cyclical stocks, economic sensitive stocks, they're not performing well. So that tells me maybe this recovery is going to be disappointing.
We're going to go to break here in a moment, Dr. Faber. When we get back, I wanted to specifically discuss the fact that you've been pointing out for years that we've not had a recovery and that you think it's going to basically implode down the road. Many others, like Jim Rogers, have been saying that. We know that governments have been cooking economic numbers as well. So I want to discuss all that with you. But just briefly, as we go to break here, I mean, is the Fed signaling that they're not going to have more quantitative easing, or are they just raising the bar?
Put yourself in the shoes of Mr. Bernanke. The oil price is over $100. He knows that the statistics are all lies. He knows that the cost of living in the U.S. are increasing at 5 to 10% per annum for the typical household. The S&P is at over 1,400. He doesn't need to do right now QE3. He can sit back and wait, let the S&P drop 100 or 200 points and come back in again and have front page articles saying he saved the financial system. So he's going to do it again as soon as the S&P drops, say 10, 20% at latest. I would rather think after a 10% drop, we have QE3.
All right, Mark, stay there. I want to come back and recap that and get into more detail, because some stations don't carry this first 5 minutes. I want to get back into that and where you see us going in the future. Dr. Marc Faber is our guest, gloomboomdoom.com. Marc Faber is our guest, and I'm holding here in my hand the Atlantic, its latest issue. It says The Hero, Ben Bernanke. They're the bankers that created all the derivatives, that ran the scams, that got rid of the Glass-Steagall Act. But he's our hero. Aren't we just blessed and lucky? And then the next article is about how Rahm Emanuel is a hero and saved Chicago. I mean, it's just a magazine about how they're wonderful heroes. I guess John Corzine with MF Global, he's another hero. I mean, these are all heroes. Obama launches all these wars. He's a hero. Give him another Nobel Peace Prize. While you're at it, dig up Hitler and give him one. Dr. Marc Faber, again, is a preeminent economist and a researcher. He authors the Gloom Boom Doom.com, the Gloom Boom and Doom Report. And breaking this down, what is the real state of the economy? Is the system fixing numbers, manipulating them? What's happening with Bernanke and this announcement about no QE3 right now? Where is it all going in the world economy, Doctor?
Well, as I said, I think there will be QE3, but not right now. I think the moment the stock market drops 10% or more, there'll be QE3. And there'll be probably QE4 and QE5 and so forth and so on. I think once you engage in monetization of government debt, then to go back and retrieve it is very difficult. To exit this strategy. Last year, 2011, 62% of government debt issuance was bought by the Federal Reserve. And I think that will continue. And the other issue that is not spoken about much, which is even more important in the context of monetary policy, is actually the fiscal deficit. It's going to be very difficult to bring down the fiscal deficit. I think it will stay very high and actually increase because of mandatory expenditures that will rise over time very significantly. And if interest rates one day go up, then obviously the interest payments on the government debt will go up substantially. So I think we're in a very difficult position. But, you know, the stock market can go up because you print money.
So they're simply devaluing the dollar. The stock market's not really up. It's just taking more dollars to buy that stock. But Dr. Faber, aren't you happy that we have heroes like Bernanke to save us? I mean, he's better than Superman.
Well, I don't know. Normally, The Atlantic is actually quite a good magazine. But recently, I think that they may have been manipulated by someone to print articles like Mr. Bernanke being a hero, when the fact is that he's the architect of the greatest economic and financial crisis since the Depression. He advocated artificially low interest rates that led to the housing bubble. He denied that there was a housing bubble and couldn't see it, and said it is well contained, and so forth. And I mean, as an economist, in my opinion, he's completely useless. Completely useless. So, you know, it's very funny that then he comes and becomes a hero. Now, I have to say, you know, if you create the greatest financial crisis in the world and you then apply monetary measures to support essentially markets, okay, that measure at that particular time may have been desirable, but it has a lot of undesirable and unintended consequences. Like the stock market went up, but the housing market didn't go up, and he wanted essentially to boost housing prices. And in the meantime, food prices are up and energy prices are up, and the wealth inequality is up. The money that has been printed, it hasn't flowed to the working population. It's flowed essentially to the 1% of the population. I don't think they're 1%. I think they are 0.25% of the population, basically to the super rich people. And I have no grudge. I benefit from that because these are my subscribers. But as an economist, and in order to stabilize the economy and create price stability, the Federal Reserve, both Mr. Greenspan and Mr. Bernanke, have completely failed. But completely. They've actually created much more uncertainty, much more economic and financial volatility. In other words, you have much larger swings in the economy. You have much larger swings in asset prices that are not particularly favorable for the investing public.
But, Doctor, isn't that good for the Goldman Sachs and other insiders who know when they're going to make announcements and know what they are? We have our own Congress here in the U.S. saying they're allowed to insider trade, and we have this article headline, Ben Bernanke saved the global economy, so why does everyone hate him? So they admit people see through this, but it is a very desperate gamble or gambit or stratagem to attempt to tell us that he cares about us when, as you said, he more than anybody is the architect of what's happening. So at a certain point...
Well, basically, if I were a conspiracy theorist, I would argue that the elite is intentionally impoverishing the population and enslaving the population through higher debts. You just look at, say, student loans. They're now close to $1 trillion, larger than credit card debit balances. I mean, these loans will be a huge burden on people working, and a lot of people will never be able to repay these loans. They'll be enslaved forever. And I mean, the problem is really, it's easy to print money, and optically it looks good first. The problem arises that when you print the money, or in the words of Mr. Bernanke, you drop the dollar bills onto the United States, helicopters, you don't know what the population will do with these dollars. What can happen in a global economy where leakages exist, it can boost the economy of China and not the economy of the United States. It can lead to undesirable consequences in the US, such as overconsumption that then lead to trade deficit. The US trade deficit is offset by the trade surplus of China, and so it creates employment in China, capital spending in China, income gains in China, consumption gains in China, but not in the US. And that is the difficulty of monetary policy. And by the way, I am completely against any government intervention in the economy, because if you follow it really through, a complete government intervention in the economy is the totalitarian socialist communist state, and all of them have failed miserably. And so if people say, oh, we have to do something, and the elite, of course, they will argue, well, we have to intervene to avoid a total disaster and so forth. They're actually protecting their own interest and not the interest of the common man in America.
Dr. Faber, you say if you were a conspiracy theorist, and I understand that's a bit tongue-in-cheek, but the crony capitalist class, this anti-free market, and wants this totalitarian system to secure their ill-gotten gains, they are scapegoating capitalism as the problem when it's been this insider system that's allowed this criminal transfer. Now,
Correct.
Okay, so you say I'm correct.
Capitalism. Well, basically, you look at the problem arose through regulation and through government-sponsored enterprises and through a manipulation by the Federal Reserve of interest rates by keeping them artificially low. And it's not a failure of the market. The market tried to solve the problem, first of all, through the SNL crisis in 1990, and then through the tequila crisis in 94, and then in 98, the market would have solved all the problems had LTCM gone bankrupt. That would have given a signal to the system, you're not allowed to leverage up too much, because if you leverage up too much and you go bankrupt, nobody will help you. But the bailout gave them the signal, there's a Greenspan put and then a Bernanke put, and just keep on leveraging, and you'll be rewarded for that. If you go bankrupt and you're the boss of the bank, they will fire you and you walk out with $100 million,